the type of like trauma, I guess, that our generation has gone through um um is not to be seen lightly. Yeah.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Ji Yeon, please go ahead.
Hey everyone. My name is Ji Yeon and I am 26 years old. I currently live in New York, but I'm originally from South Korea. So I was born and raised primarily in the outskirts of Seoul in South Korea. My first time in the US was actually for my mom's residency because she is a doctor and she was the one who kind of saw the difference in the US education system when she was doing her residency in Boston. And I went to public schools in Korea. And then for college, I applied to a US university along with my brother because we realize the opportunities and the type of thinking that they encourage here is much more critical and more, what the direction that she wanted us to grow into as. So really, my mom was the pioneer there. And now I've been living in New York for almost 8 years now. My older brother also lives in New York, works here. And previously, I worked at a tech company as a strategist, tech company called DoorDash here in the US. It's the biggest food delivery company. But I left my job recently and right now, I'm working on projects and also thinking about entering a different field. And we will talk more about why I did this later.
Yeah. And can I ask you, so you spoke already English before you went to the US, or you had to learn it in the US?
Yeah, so luckily when I moved to Boston with my
Mhm.
mom, I was only like 2, 3 years old.
Oh,
So I
okay.
was learning English with the other American babies.
Okay, good.
So I say that English and Korean were both my first languages because
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn English from scratch. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently when I came back to Korea after 3 years, I forgot how to speak Korean. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to relearn Korean again. So both languages are kind of my first language.
Cool. And for your brother, it was the same, or is he older, younger?
My older brother, he's 2 years senior to me, so
Mm-hmm.
he was a bit older, but I think, he was a bright kid and didn't have much trouble. Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, so tell a bit about your upbringing. So, so you grow up in a country,
Yeah.
um, well, and maybe, you know, by cultural upbringing, right? At
Yeah.
school, American, at home, more Korean or
Yeah.
completely Korean. So how might that have influenced the way you look at the world and what you're working on now?
Yeah, I think I had a lot more tension that was visible in high school and in college. But before that, there was a weird nagging part of me when I was growing up in South Korea. And I think I was always seen as a bit different, and I myself was a bit of an outcast, actually. So just to go back to fast forward, like when I was a kid in South Korea. I think in first grade, I skipped a year to I was born in 98, but I joined school with the kids born in 1997. And if you know anything about the Korean culture, we're incredibly ageist. So there's like a strict hierarchy based on age because of filial piety and whatnot. So I actually hid the fact that I'm 1 year younger than most people because that was recommended from my teachers to not tell your peers that you're younger because that would lead to like being bullied and stuff. But I I learned a lot of picked up Korean culture from the playground. Like the people, second graders, third graders all taught me this is how you use honorifics. Like this is how you talk to people more senior to you. And I learned a lot of the street manners from playing with sand with my girlfriends and friends, boyfriends. Um I think that I always felt a little bit like a misfit though, because I was seen as like the American girl or the girl who has a weird sense of style, the girl who's like kind of weird. And actually I was bullied in much part of my like middle school and like late elementary school years. I was seen as like a bit chubby and like weird, and a lot of friends made fun of me for no reasons. And this later, fast forward, I compete in a beauty pageant in South Korea, and I think honestly I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder growing up, like having experienced what it's like to be an outcast and bully. And I think that's a lot of what I do, inclusivity and thinking about disability justice, thinking about how to advocate for people. A lot of that stems from my own pain growing up and knowing what it's like to be like unheard and unseen. You asked about like bicultural issues. I think I grew up pretty typically South Korean, but my parents actually were incredibly like forward thinking in that they always taught us there's no hierarchy or like hierarchy in the value of occupation. In Korean, we say 직업에는 귀천 없다. It means that like in an occupation, there's no like richness or like poorness. Like all occupations are noble and valuable and important for the society. And I think if you think about the stereotypes of like an Asian parent, as you all know, they love their kids to be lawyers or doctors or otherwise you're a failure. Like that's the kind of like the talk of the stereotype of the culture. But my parents always taught me, I wanted to be a chef when I was a little girl, and my mom really encouraged me to go think about like, okay, then you can go to the best culinary school in France. When I said I wanted to do like acting and painting, she wanted to encourage me to do those things, and I learned a lot of different instruments. I played the cello, piano, clarinet, even like yodel singing and cowbells
Wow.
and like doing choir growing up. I really had the fortune of trying a lot of different testing a lot of my different um skills in a broad range, starting from science, my curiosities in science and literature and the arts and humanities and everything, because I had parents who had seen what it's like in out in the parenting, what the parenting style is like in the West, and wanted to have their kids grow a bit beyond what the Korean culture allows them to grow to. My parents always like told me Korea like is too small for you guys. So like you should always like dream big, and the world will be your oyster, the world will be your stage. And I think looking back, I really truly believe that I'm meant for like a global stage. I'm gonna be a global figure because my mom like made it such a no-brainer that that is an absolute truth. So just thinking forward about like how I want to be when I become a parent, or how I want to talk to myself without having my mom around me. Whenever I sense myself like doing negative talk, I try to tell myself no, like I was meant to do important things. Like I can do it. Like no one can stop me. And I think that's the type of thinking that helps.
where did you study ultimately? In which
Yeah.
universities or which university?
Yeah. So I studied at Columbia University in New York.
Hmm.
I applied to a US university because my brother went to high school in Korea. We both did, but my brother went to a high school that was based on merit. It's like called a genius school actually. Like a lot of people like valedictorians in middle schools go there, and it's a very like traditional school. They wear our traditional, like the uniform is like the traditional Korean dress and like outfit called hanbok, and they instill in them the value that like you guys are Korean, you're going to the West, we're training you to go to the West so that you can be a leader of Korea. And I think um he went to Stanford, and looking at my brother who is growing as a global leader but deeply rooted in Korea and Korean values, I kind of saw myself being like that as well. And I applied to US universities, not because I was sure, but because I had an older brother, and I was really lucky in that way. I don't think I would have independently like just applied to US colleges if I didn't have my brother, or I don't think my brother would have done that if we didn't have my mother. So I do think that generational knowledge, generational insight, generational wealth, these things are all true. And that's something that I think a lot about, because the things that I achieved are not because I'm an incredible person, but because I was born in an incredible environment, and that's what like Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his book Outliers as well. Outliers are not outliers because they are individually exceptional, but rather they were in brought and raised in an outlier-like circumstance. Yeah.
So you studied at Columbia University. What did you study, and why?
Yeah, this is also I guess like a theme that you'll pick up from what I say is that everything I do, I put a lot of thought into, almost over engineer things. So, choosing my major was also a big deal for me because I had moved 7,000 miles away from my hometown, away from my family, and I was honestly, it was the first time given freedom in pursuing knowledge. I had kind of like a path that I had followed growing up in the rigid education system of South Korea, where my sole goal was like getting into a good university. And now that I'm here, like I'm an adult now, it felt like I really can't muck it up. I need to really put in the deliberate effort to find who I am and what kind of person I want to be. So I actually tried a lot of different majors. I took one class in at least every department, like chemistry, religion, philosophy, economics, architecture, like literally all the departments. And I changed my major like 10 times as well. But I ultimately graduated with a degree in information science and statistics. And that's because I initially declared my major as data science. Um, and then like senior year, later on, I took a class called human-centered design that kind of changed my educational journey, because human-centered design is kind of like an interdisciplinary discipline where they combine engineering and business and other um, disciplines to solve a problem, and their approach to whatever engineering or business problem is that you need to look at things from a human lens, because at the end of the day, all the problems that we're trying to solve for is for the user, is for the human. So my major was information science with a focus on human-centered design. And then the statistics just came along because I took too many statistics courses while pursuing my data science major. Yeah.
Okay. Um, wow, that's very impressive. A question about your brother and actually about you. You mentioned that, the expectation
Yeah.
that you guys would be, the Korean leaders, the examples, right?
Yeah.
So did your, from your point of view, did your brother succeed there? Is he that leader? And what about yourself?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I think we are leaders in different ways. I think how you define a leader might change your perspective, and I think that I can see someone seeing us as leaders, both of us as leaders. It's funny because my brother and I are very different people, almost like the polar opposite different people, and people who know us are just so shocked that we are from the same pair, same mother. Um, I, and I want to caveat this by saying that I don't think I'm anywhere near a leader, but just assuming that I go in the trajectory of where I'm going, like that's the type of leader I want to be. So my brother is the type of person who has always been in like um top of the class. Like he was the top of the class in elementary school, middle school, went to the best high school in South Korea, went to the best college in the US, went to the best masters in the US, did research under the best AI professor. Like he studied electrical engineering, computer science at Stanford University. He was trained under Andrew Ng, who's like the person in AI. He now works at a quantitative hedge fund as a researcher. So, like in someone's eyes, he's like taken the elite path, like really, really sharp, smart, incredibly, hardworking person. Um, my philosophy to leadership has always been it's changed a lot, but I think at the core, I was someone who was more mission driven and sometimes to a fault because I would be like too focused on the mission that I forget about what others might see as a more secular way definition of success. And I think my relationship with achievement and my ambition has been really a delicate dance of like the secular notion of like traditional success and being like passion first and mission first. I think I'm someone who is somewhere in between. I'm not all the way on the other side of like solely focusing on the message and the arts and the crafts and the impact. I don't think I have the courage to be only focused on those things right now at this stage because I have a lot of influence, graduating from Columbia, just seeing people who are so focused on getting the titles, like getting the promotion. Um, and unfortunately, and fortunately, our society is a place that values those stickers and the signals of success. So I know my kind of view on leadership is that I want to be someone who can speak both languages. Um, I want to be able to speak the language of what works for majority of people because you need to work with the system. You can't work around the system. And even if I know that like the things I'm working on are noble and important, I think if you can't signal that to the world, it's not as effective. And this philosophy stems from my short involvement in effective altruism. I don't know if you've heard of this movement called this intellectual movement called effective altruism, but essentially they are people who think that in altruism, in philanthropy, you don't become a philanthropist by being vegan yourself and doing grassroots movements. That's actually the person that I was in freshman year and in my early years of my late teens and early 20s. I was the head of Columbia's EcoReps like dining committee. I was vegan for many years in college. I did a lot of things that was more activism oriented. And then I think the more like realistic side of me, who saw what works with the system, like I'm just saying that as a conceptual thing, realized that um, pe the society values capital. The society values power, and the most effective way to get your message across is unfortunately to be really conventionally successful. And that's like the effective altruism mechanism, how they think about things. So I've then focused more on how do I actually like develop my career in that direction. Right now, where I stand is that I've gone deliberately, like out of college. My first job was at a big tech company, where it was all about like gaining those recognition, gaining those stamp of approvals in the conventional way of success. And then I pulled the plug on that like after 2 years because I just knew that this is the direction, this is too far in the other direction that I wanted to go to. So now I've taken 3 months. I'm 3 months out of, working. And I've taken those past 3 months to really reflect on what kind of person I want to be and where I can be in order to maximize my impact. And um, I'm nowhere near figuring out like what the answer is, but I think I have a better idea than I had whilst I was working at this tech company. And yeah, I know this is a bit of a roundabout answer to your question of like, am I a leader? And my answer is that or I think I'm a very different leader from my brother, and I don't think I'm a leader yet, but I know who I want to be, and I'm going in that direction, if that makes sense.
When you started to talk about, that there was a special class for people like your brother who were doing very well,
Yeah.
then you also mentioned that, okay, you're being prepared to become a leader abroad, a
Yeah.
Korean leader abroad.
Yeah.
So if you, so I understand your explanation about that you are a leader. From
Yeah.
the Korean point of view, are you the expected leader?
Yeah. Um, what's funny is that um I think Koreans, because we value the university titles so much,
Mm.
that it's actually not that difficult to get the title of earn the respect of Korea society in general's respect. I think just by going to a top university, you can already kind of be a pseudo leader. And I I that's why actually I try to distance myself from how like understanding what Koreans might see me as, because I think I have such a long way to go. But if I go back to Korea, like I'm already like, oh, this impressive person who went to an Ivy League and got a big tech job and is living in New York. And it seems like I've already like succeeded and am a leader. I really don't think I am anywhere close. And that's why I think that um I need to be really staunch about how I define leadership and what kind of leader I want to be. Because um to be honest, like to live in New York City itself is like top 0.01% of the global population's like desire. We're in the world's capital. To have a livable wage and live in, Manhattan even is like the dream for many people. So to want more from here, to be honest, is yeah, it is agreed. And so if I'm trying to, give a pat on myself and be humble and be realistic, like I think anyone living in Manhattan is quote unquote like successful, have made it. They are a small percentage of wherever small town they grew up in. Um, and we're, becoming leaders of our own respective small towns. But I think that is such a lax definition, because that entirely excludes the meaning of leader in terms of the characteristics and their actions and their values. And those are the things that I focus a lot more on. And yeah, and in that sense, I think the Korean society in general might see me as a successful person, but I think there are a lot more ambitions that I want to strive
Hmm.
towards. Just to name one, I think I have a lot more to give to people. I haven't made any contributions into society in a meaningful way because I've been more focused on developing my own skills. I think I have a lot of things I want to give back to society on. And that's like one of the ways that I think a true leader would behave.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Um, you also have a website where you share a number of things. One of the things that I picked up is that you call yourself a philosophical entrepreneur. Can you
Yeah.
tell the audience what that exactly means? And are you still the philosophical entrepreneur? Because
Yeah.
you told me that you're now at a crossroads, right? You're searching for the next stage. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah, thank you for noticing that. The way that I wrote it on my website is that I'm a philosophical entrepreneur, or perhaps an entrepreneurial philosopher. And it was kind of a cheek in the tongue like
Mhm.
wordplay. But what I really meant there is that um I that that's something that I want to capture by explaining my desire to achieve both conventional or secular success as well as a more uh spiritual, like Zen, grounded, like happiness. I think that I I realized the times that I was happiest in my life is when I had so much energy and woke up at 6 a.m. and journaled every day and meditated every day and just was filled with joy because of the great people that I have and all the ideas that I wanted to do. And and I was working on important projects that I thought were contributing to the society in meaningful ways. I didn't have like my Columbia degree then. I didn't have any of these like big jobs and big salaries, but I think that is how the epitome of my emotional and like spiritual being of success that I see. And I am not there right now at all. Like I have not reached that state of, you know, emotional success in 3, 4, 5 years. Materially, I think I'm a lot more successful now. I had a big job. I have offers from big jobs. Um, I know that I can like get into top university programs for, an MBA degree or whatnot if I really tried hard, because my profile is just it looks similar to people who already have those degrees. Um, but I know that just going down that path is not um the type of like happiness and success that I see and want to live as either. So what I mean by philosophical entrepreneur is in whatever I do, I want to maintain this duality of thinking from the root, from the philosophy of what I do should be grounded from a reminder that any kind of entrepreneurial actions I take must be grounded from the more philosophical reasoning of why. And I'll give you an example of like the type of philosophical entrepreneurial things I've done. I have like a short thing that I wrote down before, so I think this could be helpful. So let's see. Um, and there's like a project that was inspired that me to do these things, and it was an interview project. I would love to share more in a bit, but long story short, I saw that a lot of my college colleagues were pursuing careers in, very prestigious jobs, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, what have you, in Wall Street, big companies. But when I asked them in my sophomore year if they were excited about their summers, like if if they are ready to be like in the leaders in those kind of companies as they start their summers there, they were like, no, I'm actually not excited at all. And a lot of them were also filled with fear and pessimism and just a lot of self-deprecating sentiments. And it really puzzled me why these smart, promising young kids at a top university like Columbia would be thinking in that way. And I wanted to understand why people in their 20s do what they do. What is the true motivation that drives them towards those kind of career choices and actions in their lives? And I had a data science internship offer that summer, but I decided to forego that in order to go on my own project of interviewing people on the streets. So I went to Netherlands as well, but I traveled to 12 different countries and interviewed almost 200 people on the streets to
Wow.
understand why they're doing what they're doing. And um, I think that's when I first realized that at that point I was like entirely like anti-corporate. So at that point, like I didn't have any like corporate jobs. I was like rejecting corporate offers, and I was like, we need to get a more like spiritual movement going. We need to like help people get self-actualized. And I was like doing meditation and trying to create like meditation courses for people. I was working with the university to make a class called Design Your Life as an undergrad like prerequisite. And I just wanted to instill in people a more like intentional way of looking and thinking about their life choices. Um, but I also was interested in entrepreneurship, and the types of projects that I worked on at that period of my life was I wrote it down here is here I decided to commit the rest of my life to helping people flourish in their lives through a systemic change. I sought out ways to build solutions to facilitate a conscious and conscientious life. Before the pandemic, I designed a mobile app to bridge global friendships between locals and tourists. I built a clothes sharing platform for students in the Columbia community to reshape the fashion industry, the fast fashion industry, and build a circular economy around waste reduction. I joined a startup that helps young professionals find communities of shared interests in their new cities. And at the height of the pandemic, I co-founded a video conferencing product to alleviate the pain caused by remote work. So these like four projects that I mentioned were all my way of practicing philosophical entrepreneurship. I don't want to build companies or be an entrepreneur just to make a quick buck. I genuinely think that every action that I take must be rooted from the desire to help people lead a more as I say, conscious and conscientious life, because that was a mission that was so important to me.
Yeah, so all the things that you mentioned, I think they are fantastic. So if I understood you correctly, but you did not pursue them further because you decided to go to DoorDash, right? So yeah, so those projects did not
Yeah.
take did not come to life ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, these projects were all pursued during university.
Hmm.
And I think there was a more realistic barrier. At this time, if I think of myself, I see myself as this really raw, like bursting in flames, like so passionate, like a wild horse, almost like a wild bull, just ready to go, change the world, like angry, not angry, actually. I was not angry. I was just excited and go, go, go. But I realized I lacked the training to and the chops, like the technical chops. I didn't know what it meant to be a good, operator, a good designer, a good strategist. I simply didn't have what's required to build a company successfully. So at that point, all I had was 100% passion, 100% willpower, and just like raw, like young, youthful, spirited energy, but none of the technical technical training. So my rationale for going to DoorDash actually was really intentional. when I was interviewing with DoorDash and got the offer, I knew that this would be a phase where I had to really give up my passion side because just going back to the philosophical entrepreneur, aspect of me, DoorDash is not the most philosophical, you know, life-saving work that I can do. The work that I did was helping New York gain more market share and trying to win over the market tide against Uber Eats. And I think it is somewhat meaningful in that we work with small, medium businesses who would have otherwise struggled if they weren't on our platforms. And I think it was most rewarding when I work with English as a second language merchants like in Queens and Flushing who do not speak English, but um, let's be real. Like the reason you work at DoorDash is not because you're trying to lead a conscious and conscientious life. For me, DoorDash was strictly a phase of like learning the chops of how do I build um learning from a company that had made it in the most competitive market in one of the most competitive industries, which is food delivery in New York City. It was DoorDash had seen an unprecedented growth, and they won over the market share even as a later player that came into the New York market. So for me, that was just an opportunity to learn the chops. And I think I left when I thought um it was it came at a cost of something more fundamental to who I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now I feel that you were close to bringing both aspects together.
Yeah.
I would like to go quickly back to then the research that you did in so many countries, which is really impressive.
Mm.
And we should compare notes because we
Yeah.
also have we organized several roundtable discussions with younger generation to kind of find out what drives them.
Wow.
Um, but I told you that this particular podcast is a spin-off of 100 Mile Walk that I started in 2012.
Wow.
And when I do those walks, I'm often accompanied by other people, and we then start talking about especially after mile 10 or 15 when your knee starts to hurt, why do you do this? What drives you in life, right? And then also often we talk about spirituality and religion, because that's something that, at least for me, walking does to you. You look at nature and environment. So
Mm.
my question that I always have for my guests, and I think it is linked with what you've tried to do with that
Yeah.
research, is what do you see happening among the younger generation in your own community with regard to religion and spirituality?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's the world is dizzying because even for me, someone in my mid-20s, it just changes so quickly at an unpredictable rate and unpredictable direction. The research I did was in 2019, so right before the pandemic, the summer of 2019. I think the world was entirely different from where it is right after the pandemic, 2 years after the pandemic, and this year, right after the election. Um, I think at that time in 2019 summer, the world was still very much like um sane. Like people were reasonable, and a lot of the people that I talked to, whether they were aware of it or not, the young communities, I mostly talked to university students, they weren't entirely sure what they were doing, but all of them had the desire for self-actualization, whether they were acutely aware of it or not. And I think that since then, like social media had become a thing, TikTok had become more of a thing, um, and politics had become more divided, segregated. Like far right-wing parties have populism had become more pronounced. So I think a lot of the climate had changed, and the mentality of the youth have also changed. But I think what I can say now is Nowadays, I think people really yearn for a community. Um, and I think that they find their meaning in what they're trying to serve through those like alt-right movements or through like identity politics or through like TikTok or social media. I think that the pandemic had really scarred our generation in ways that we can't even like grasp that and religion is less of a part in our days now. And so I think people try to find a replacement for religion through social media and politics. Um, and I think that, yeah, like it's hard to point a finger or blame people when they, at the end of the day, what they are seeking is a sense of community and belonging and a sense of purpose. And it is like a twisted way sometimes, and it is unhealthy in some ways. But I think the type of like trauma, I guess, that our generation has gone through um um is not to be seen lightly. Yeah.
Mhm. No, thanks for that. Um, you know, and you know, when I listen to you, um, also it has to do with I think a lot of us are worried also about the future of humanity, the future of the planet.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and one of the things that we as humans have done is we were able to kind of agree on 17 sustainable development goals.
Yeah.
And you know, not everybody might be aware of them, but as a world, a lot of people were involved in that process.
Yeah.
17 goals were identified to, you know, to ensure that this world ultimately will become more sustainable. Well, we are not reaching those goals. We are on average at 15 to 70%, and we should
Yeah.
reach those goals in 2030. So
Yeah.
a question that I always have for my guests is two things around the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs. Is one is, have you heard about them? And then second, um, what do you want the listeners to know about them?
Yeah, I am very familiar with the SDG goals. Um, I want the listeners to know that there is so much noise and like filter and discussion around the SDG goals that are way off from the core of what it's about. I think people nowadays really lose focus on what the core of the thing is and focus on the distractions and the bells and whistles and the embellishments. Like, why are we talking about Greta Thunberg as a highly politicized, polarized figure when literally she's trying to save you and your future generations? I think the topic of climate has become so unnecessarily politicized that I think it became a topic that is not about the truth and about the wellness of our family and our future generations. It's become a thing about identity. Like, oh, I am Team Elon. I am Team Trump. Like, we're gonna pump those oil, baby. Like, pump it. Like, it became more about who you identify with as opposed to looking at like directly at what it's saying. I think I want the listeners to, in case they are like confused about what to trust, like I just want them to think logically and like really listen to what this person's trying to achieve, what the incentives are. What does the United Nations have to get from, say, providing quality education? What does Greta Thunberg have to gain from um being on strike for climate action? They have nothing to gain personally. They're doing that for our generation, for your family, for you. Whereas what is Trump trying to gain from encouraging oil pumping? What is Elon trying to gain? They have so much financial upside and personal gains to get from that. So I want the listeners to, whether it's the SDG goals or something else, I want them to like cut out the noise and develop the muscle to think for themselves. Just like sit in a room, like close your eyes and think about, why does this person want me to have access to clean energy and zero hunger and no poverty? Is it because they're really like spiteful and have like hidden agendas to ruin the world? I think any logical person would think like, no, that's not the case. So yeah, I think that it's really unfortunate that these no-brainer things that we should be thinking about how to push forward, how to make another climate like Paris Agreement, not cutting back from Paris
Mm.
Agreement, not going backwards again, not questioning the fundamentals of whether this is even a fact. It makes me really worried, honestly, to see where we are today. And I think that if humanity goes extinct in a couple of centuries, like honestly, like probably we deserve to.
And I would like to piggyback on train that muscle that you mentioned. You know, I did say that on average we are at 15 to 70% of reaching those
Yeah,
goals, which is
yeah,
really worrisome. Now, a
yeah.
growing group of people said, one of the reasons that we are not reaching those goals is that, for in order for those system changes to happen and structure changes to happen, we need to work on ourselves and we need to work on our community.
Hmm.
And so they developed the inner development goals. And those inner development goals are five:
Hmm.
being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And
Hmm.
then they identify 23 skills that you need, like empathy, critical thinking, trust. Um, so, yeah, my question is, have you heard about the inner development goals?
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
and, if not, what do you think about them? And if yes, what do you think about them?
Yeah. Wow. I actually only heard of it after you sent me the email.
Hmm.
So I am only familiar from the past few hours.
Yeah.
Um, what I
So what
think
is your
about
first impression? Yeah.
Uh, I thought that my first impression was I assumed it's something about like how to develop our characteristics as just a good human. I didn't know that it was directly tied to the SDG goals and pushing forward the personal achievements you need to make in order to make the societal, like global landscape achievements in terms of the SDG. And I think that I'm just reading it right now, actually. It's um, really cool that people thought about how can I make a change internally on my level in order to, create a butterfly effect of this becoming a global change in terms of SDG goals. I think my skepticism with this is that um, when I read the word critical thinking, it doesn't really mean much. When I see trust, it doesn't really mean much. I'm afraid that these are just words that is difficult for people to understand. And I think um people who would probably visit these goals are those like yourself or me or the audience who are listening to this, who already care about the SDG goals and creating a better future for our planet, as opposed to those who actively don't think of, like, either don't think about it at all or actively try to put those down. So I wonder if there is a way to like sneakily encourage these inner development goals as a part of some kind of campaign or like some kind of like news outlet to encourage that kind of thought. And I'm not answering your question directly, but I actually recently read on the Wall Street Journal that The Onion, which is a satirical paper, a satire magazine, purchased InfoWars, which is a really abhorrent, terrible, notorious company that like spread false news about the victims of Sandy Hook, like the gun shoot incident, and like spread terrible news that like false news that the families were paid actors. Um, Infowars is on is on route to purchasing this company. And why is because they fundamentally believe that you can't like argue with people who are non-believers or naysayers by trying to have a logical and sensible conversation with them. They simply don't care about courage, integrity, authenticity, self-awareness. Or in fact, maybe I think they actually believe that they are being courageous, integritous, authentic, open. So the best way that the Onion says to fight any kind of like different perspective is by humor and satire, because I think that it really diffuses the tension and lowers what is at stake. So I wonder if there's a way to encourage these kind of inner development goals through like diffusing it into humor and satire, because at the end of the day, we need to look at something that is more universally, like fundamentally human, I think. And I think something that we all connect on as human is humor
Mm.
and like laughing and having a good time and food and like something that we can all bond over. So yeah, this is not like a concrete answer into what the steps should be taken are, but I'm thinking, what is something that people all love? Laughing and food and like having a good time and music. Is there a way we can bring
Mm.
all things together in order to encourage, like empathy and connection and trust? And yeah, I think that inner development goals have a great framework, and I would love to see how they are integrating this into real like action.
Mm. No, thanks for that. And the listeners know I actually resonate. I think our what I sometimes say, I think our life should be a dance of the arts, science and religion.
Mm,
So I yeah, I do. I mean, I'm happy that you mentioned music. You're able to play several instruments. So I have always a question about music as well. And if you had to choose a song or a piece of music that represents for a big part
yeah,
who you are, or what you
yeah.
are about, which song or piece of music would that be and why?
Yeah. Wow. Um, I think that I think that there's one based on the past and one based on the future. The song that I relate a lot is Good Morning Baltimore from the musical Hairspray, because I actually relate to Tracy from Hairspray a lot. She was like this kind of like outcast that was laughed over, but she always had like this really upbeat spirit, and she wanted to yell to the world like, "Good morning, Baltimore, more. I'm here, like I'm ready, let's go." And I just really love that innocence and that spirit of the character Tracy. Um, and I just relate that to her a lot as the little girl that I was many years ago. Um, and but looking forward, that was probably in my teen, and now what I think the song that I relate more to is probably like A Whole New World, Aladdin. Um, I think that one of my many goals in life is to be a lyricist, and I draw a lot of inspiration from Disney music because it captures such a pure, like, sense of hope for the world, love for the world, joy about life. Um, that is, it just captures it in such a beautiful, remarkable way. And I hope to, one of my life goals is to be a lyricist for Disney songs. And yeah, A Whole New World is just it gives this sense of like awe for life and the world and all the possibilities ahead of you. Like shiny, shiny, shivering splendor. You're on a ma magic carpet, and we can dream whatever might happen, might happen. Unbelievable sights. Like life is a mystery and wonderful. And I just love that positive spirit. It's really easy to be pessimistic when you hear about these statistics of how much percent of the SDG goals we're meeting while we have 6 years left, and the state of, the politics, the geoclimate. But I think at the end of the day, I have a lot of hope for humanity. I think I have been awed during the pandemic when I saw how resilient people were and how hopeful and strong people were. And I remain my fundamental faith for humanity, for yeah, people. And I think that a whole new world just helps me maintain that like positive perspective. Yeah.
Great. No, and thank you for that. I like hearing that and talk about hope, and definitely listening to you. And I'm sure the listeners have the same thing. It gives hope.
Thank you.
Just in case you're not aware, so those two songs I will add to Spotify playlist that we developed.
Oh,
So
thank
if you
you.
go to Spotify and you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you will find all the songs that have been selected by the guests so far.
Oh,
So your two songs will be added to that.
thank you. I'm honored.
What I also hope that this podcast does is connecting people. So I connect you with the listeners. We are connected. But I also are trying to connect my guests. So, and one way of doing that is by uh, sharing with you a question that the previous guest has for you.
How do you avoid double standards? Let me explain. Usually you get to a point where you realize that you have to put so many hats, and at times the so many hats that you have to put on don't always correlate. So you are out there, you are an activist who is advocating for the rights of women and something, but then you come home and you're in an African home where you're supposed to be this African father, not my father. So you're supposed to be this African father who's like strict and this and all and that. Or at times you're this big boss out there, but then at home you're a wife. Or there are times where you feel like you're living some kind of a double standard. Like you have to be this person in this platform, you have to be this person in this platform. How do you make sure that that doesn't wear you out?
I think that this is something that is one of the biggest growing pains that I've had in the past few years. I think I'm a pretty agreeable person. I see myself as someone very diplomatic, open-minded. I love to engage with both parties. I love listening and understanding from both parties. Just to put it, you know, blandly, I have friends who are both Republicans and liberals. I have friends who are pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. I have friends who are incredibly like diverse in their perspectives, and that's just the type of person who I am. I think there is good in everyone's intention, and I want to understand, be someone. I see myself as someone who's like a micro unifier who brings different people together by helping them understand each other's perspectives. But I realize that if I don't take a stance on some things, I lose my authenticity. I think when I read this question, immediately what jumped to my mind was how you can't be a leader and also like not stand in any way, because I've always maintained a neutral position. And I think that also neutrality is a cop-out. I think that what I realized is true leaders are not afraid to be hated by some people. because that comes with massive big support for one side. If you look at some of the best like venture capitalists in the world, surprisingly, a lot of them are, you know, there are a lot of big finance presidents in Wall Street who are liberals, but do not show that because it is not good for their company image to be on any stance. And I think that while I had more of a neutral stance in order to maintain my own image of not being a polarized person, I think recent political climate and incidents and things have required me to step up more and take a staunch position. And honestly, like I lost some friends because of that. It was the first time I lost a friend because of my views and political opinion. I'm not a very like political person, but um I think that some people simply couldn't be friends with me for taking a stance on some issues. And it was really painful because I am, as I said, a people pleaser and an agreeable person, and I feel hurt when someone at the thought that someone like does not like me. And I think it's just because of maybe the past of like being bullied. Maybe that's why. But at the same time, I feel like there is a lot of strength and power to be gained when you stand up for someone else, especially if it's someone of who are weaker than us, who are more marginalized, who don't have those equal voice. Standing up for them at the cost of losing another, if I truly believe is right, is something that's incredibly respectful and noble. So I'm just learning how to be not liked by everyone, being okay not being universally loved and liked, if that means I can protect one smaller cohort, even if it's smaller, even if it's far few, if it means that they have massive upside. I'm learning that that could be a worthy loss to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think that's because I know the person who came up with the question, and he was really looking for some guidance there and some advice. So I think that was really helpful for her. Your question for the next guest.
Oh, okay. So, I think that what I struggle with the most right now in my life is being okay with doors being closed. I think what I realized is when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, I was objectively young, so I can do anything. When I was in college, many people said, "Oh, like what you major in doesn't matter. Where you go to college doesn't matter. When you get your first job, oh, your first job doesn't matter." And then, fast forward, I'm in my mid-20s. I had my first 2 years of work experience, and now it seems like everything I do can matter, can count, because I'm entering my later 20s, and then you have to make decision of where to settle down, where to marry, who to marry, all these big life decisions, and all of a sudden, every action I take has massive, both is a limiting factor. I can't keep all the doors open anymore, and is something that I need to hold accountable for. So my question to the audience is how did you while coming of age, while becoming entering your later 20s, earlier 30s, 40s, 50s, how did you be okay with the fact that the decisions you make might be irreversible and might close the doors? And how did you have trust in your decisions in that process? I think I have a hard time like believing in my decisions, and I think it's something that I really need to develop if I want um to further grow as a responsible human being and adult.
These conversations always go fast.
Oh no.
I, you know, so I have two quick last questions for you.
Yes.
One is any last message, invitation, or question for the listeners?
I think that there is um a lot of opportunity to find pockets of um hope and joy and happiness in your life if you create mechanism in your micro ecosystem in your life. And one way that I thought about that today is I was, just before recording this podcast, I was at a gym in a workout class. It was like a group fitness class. And after the class, there was this guy who actually it seemed like he had an injury. I think his like arms were a bit amputated, if is that the word? Amputated. Yeah. He had like amputated arms, which means that like arms were like cut off surgically, but he was helping like pick up all the dumbbells and organizing them and putting into the right categories, like 3 pounds and 3 pounds, 5 pounds and 5 pounds. And I realized, wow, like he absolutely didn't need to do that. He was one of the class participants, but he was just doing that um, just because. And I told him, that is so kind of you. And it really inspired me because if someone who doesn't have like the physical mechanisms to do that can do that, like I literally have no excuse not to pick up the trash and to do things in a better way. And so I, like picked up the garbage like on my way here, and just I was just so inspired by seeing how he made me feel, and he is creating leaving the place a better place than he found. And I think there is so much power that you can wield in a small way that you don't even realize. And I hope that instead of trying to change the world in a massive way, instead of like leaving my responsibility to give back to the society, give back to my community in 10 years when I'm ready, when I'm, more financially stable or whatever, I think I can absolutely start doing that now. And I think that's the type of mentality that I want to have. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, and any question that I should have asked, but I did not ask you?
Oh, yeah. I feel like this conversation could have gone on for like many more hours. This was so
I
fun,
think so
so
too.
so
Yeah.
engaging, and I really appreciate your time. So I think one question that I would love to would have loved to answer is like what's next for me, because I am in this like transitional period. And I don't think we talked much about like why am I doing this? Like for what to what end? And just to like give a perspective of where I am now. Yeah, so I had that phase of my life when I was all passion, and then like my corporate life was like all skills building. And I think my next job could be either like a bit more skills building, but with projects that fulfill me in the heart. I have a small podcast that I'm working to set up with my friend as well. And I've been on my YouTube channel, I've been interviewing founders, artists, people who also left their jobs to pursue something that was different from the normal path. So that could be one way, but I'm also very interested in education, innovation, and impact investing. I think that the best way to grant economic mobility, achieve personal fulfillment, lifelong, learning, and just an overall healthier, better society is at the core is education. So not for now, but I really want to go into the education space, either pursue a PhD down the line or work with nonprofits that work on education and like talent investment. So yeah, I would love um to revisit like 5-10 years down the line, if I as a person of more knowledge and wisdom then as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we just agreed that at a later stage we will do another episode.
Yes.
Here. In the meantime, though, I would encourage the listeners to check out your website, and because I do think ultimately you will report back there what you're doing, and where should people go? What is your
So it's my first name, Jiyeon, Jieon, stoppable, stoppable.com. And all of my handles, social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram are all Jiyeon Stoppable. And if you can get it already, it means it's a wordplay of unstoppable, like Ji Unstoppable. So it's kind of like Kim Possible, but Ji Unstoppable.
No, and there's a lot of interesting things that you can read and look at. So yeah, keep follow that space, keep an eye there. Yeah, then what is left is to thank you for your willingness to talk with me and really opening up and share your experience, your knowledge. It was great, and I know for a fact that we will hear more from you in
Thank you so
some way or the other. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you
Good luck.
for your amazing, like interview and for really listening and making me feel listened as well.
Right back at you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go the extra mile. Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.